Washington Journal continues.
And we want to welcome back to our table Representative Gwen Moore, Democrat of Wisconsin, represents the 4th District and has been a lead voice in the House on domestic violence, sponsoring the Domestic Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act of 2012. What was your initial reaction to the Ray Rice video and the NFL response to it?
I'll have to tell you, Greta, my reaction was, why did we have to see the video to understand that this was a violence against women, against a woman? Reports were that she was rendered unconscious. That was enough for me. I didn't need the visual to understand how devastating this injury was to her.
Who should have done what in the Ray Rice case?
You know, I am just baffled by why there's so much discussion, this great indictment of the NFL, the Ravens team. I am wondering, as a legislator, what happened to law enforcement here? What happened? She was arrested instead of being taken to the hospital? Let me tell you, if Ray Rice had been hit on a football field and rendered unconscious for 2 minutes, even 2 minutes, he'd have been airlifted off that field to the best medical facility in the region and given an MRI immediately. And I haven't heard any reports that there was any medical treatment given to Jana. I find that absolutely appalling. Where were the advocates? Where was the DA? Where was the court system? My understanding, Greta, is that that basically Ray Rice doesn't have to face any further law enforcement activity. We are here talking about what the Ravens should have done, what the NFL should have done, and he's not going to experience any legal consequences for his behavior.
Legally, what should have happened? What is supposed to happen? What are the laws on the books?
Well, I can tell you that he was arrested, but she was arrested as well, and they left and just went home. I think what should have happened, there should have been a real assessment about the danger that she was in. To have been rendered unconscious meant that there was a great deal of anger and rage, and I would be very, very concerned about them leaving and going home together, that someone did spend the night in jail.
How prevalent of a situation is domestic violence in this country?
I can tell you that it is very prevalent, but it has decreased substantially by 2/3 since we passed the Violence Against Women Act. The Violence Against Women Act has provided resources to advocates, shelter for women escaping from abusers. It has brought together the best practices of law enforcement, the district attorneys, the court system, even the medical profession. When women show up at a hospital now, they are routinely asked whether or not they're safe in their home. If there are suspicious injuries, there is an assessment right there in the emergency room as to whether or not they are facing domestic violence. So the Violence Against Women Act, this is the 20th anniversary today, Greta, and it has raised the consciousness of the nation, and it has lowered the incidence of domestic violence in our country. Although, 3 women a day die at the hands of an abuser.
Yeah, we read earlier the papers cited a 64% reduction in domestic violence since the Violence Against Women Act was passed in 1994. Today marks the 20th anniversary. You were the lead sponsor of the reauthorization of that act. What did that law, what was added to the law under the reauthorization?
It was very difficult to get it over the finish line, but we added protections in for Native American women, and for LGBTQ women. Prior to this reauthorization, a Native American woman did not have the protection on tribal lands against a non-tribal member. Literally, we've heard reports and stories of how men would drag Native women back onto tribal lands to beat them, rape them, knowing that they could do it with no consequences. And of course, lesbian women have been victims of violence, and they weren't taken very seriously. Often they weren't admitted to shelters because of their LGBTQ status. And we remedy that with this reauthorization, and worked very hard to enhance opportunities for immigrant women who are often held hostage by their status, and really looked at enhancing protections for young women, college-age women, in this reauthorization, a time when women are extremely vulnerable for violence.
USA Today editorial this morning agrees with you that people should be looking at the prosecutors here, the police, but they also say that major institutions like the NFL have a role to play, and the message that they send is a message that they send to society, and so that the NFL should get serious about this type of issue. Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut, Senator, Democrat, Blumenthal, excuse me, said recently, this is a CNN article, that Ray Rice firing is not enough and that maybe the NFL should get some special scrutiny from Congress on this.
You want to know, I just thought, what message does it send to a young boy who might aspire to be an NFL player, to know that the consequences for smoking a joint is more consequential than rendering your wife or girlfriend unconscious. So I do think that that workplaces, not just the NFL, ought to have some code of conduct for their employees, and especially something as visible as the NFL.
Should Congress give the NFL special scrutiny on this?
I'm not sure that Congress ought to do anything. I think that the NFL, we have seen, is very capable of creating a code of conduct that is commensurate with the status of the organization, with the kinds of salaries that these men render, and if they can have a policy regarding use of drugs, they know what the local laws are.
Yeah.
And if they, I think that they ought to respect the laws on domestic violence. He should not have been playing a game the day after rendering his wife unconscious. I don't think we need to do a congressional act for them to realize that that's just tone deaf.
But you do think companies should be able to fire an employee if they have committed domestic violence?
Well, I can tell you that there are many consequences that inure to a company or to a franchise like the NFL. If for a fact you're married and you have a health insurance plan, presumably your wife and your children would be covered by that insurance plan. I can tell you that that it will cost you greater premiums. There's a cost to a company for having a violent employee. Just recently, I got a notice from my insurance company saying we'll no longer insure you if you have a pit bull in your house. So if you've got a pit bull on the job, that would bring consequences to the company.